And welcome to another episode of whatever Speakeasy Reviews is called, as far as what our episodes are called. That's the best cold open I can come up with. Dixon, how you doing?
I'm doing well, and you obviously prepared. So,
I prepared. I big time. I thought, let's see where it goes. I'm just going to jump in and start talking,
right,
and then it was
right.
utter garbage that came out of my mouth.
Sure. I
Um,
mean, listen, if a Hollywood executive is listening right now, or a radio station executive, I'm sure they're clamoring to figure out what's your phone number and contact info, who's your agent, all the rest of that.
oh my gosh, yeah, they're not. I think this is a very raw us. So they're
Oh
seeing
yeah.
potential, bags and bags of
Yeah.
potential. That's
I'm
what I'm hoping here.
45 and I'm yet to hit my peak, everyone watching.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming, right?
It's
Still
coming. It's
climbing up that mountain, trust me.
it's a delayed bell curve. It's coming. So we wanted to review the Star Wars prequels, and Dixon, I'm gonna make this one statement about the prequels and the postquels, or the postambles, or the final, whatever you want to call them. And the one thing I do get annoyed about when people look at things like Star Wars or Indiana Jones remakes, or not remakes, or continuations, is the expectation that they are going to stand up to the hype that the original films stood up to. So there's an expectation, I think, that's false when people go into this, when they watch these films. But I also think that the films that were made, and watching these, when you watch Star Wars again, we always are going to have a fluffy sort of pink hue around those films, because if you watch them and you judge it on today's standards, the original three films, they're a bit sketchy if they were to come out now. But because they have this originality and this sort of cult following, and this feel of nostalgia, and because they built this incredible brand, they are able to exist as they are. But now we're judging these films in modern day standards, not to the same standards the original three films were judged on.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, when you have a set of films, three, and let's say three, the sequel films,
Yeah,
that were filmed in groups, basically 15 to 20 years apart, right? So Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi is 77 to 83. Then you fast forward to 99 to 2005, and you get your Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. And then you fast forward again, and maybe not quite as far, because I think I want to say the Force Awakens came out like right around Christmas of 15. And then 17 was The Last Jedi, and 19, like they were released in a tighter window, 15 to 19, I think.
yeah.
But cinema changes, and especially like anything else, with the rapid change in technology. So, Star Wars, the original three, ushered in, I mean, George Lucas basically invented, I don't want to say invented an industry. It's not that the movies didn't have special effects prior to Star Wars, but he really, the idea that you would have a special effects house the way he had,
Yeah.
basically used his budget to build. I mean, that's what he spent so much of his budget on the original film on. And then all the techniques that were developed there. It really, I mean, you look at anything pre-Star Wars in terms of special effects, it's a different, it feels earlier, Then you look at Star Wars, and obviously they've been cleaned up digitally, so they look a little bit better than they probably did, if you were to just look at the raw ones without the cleanup. But still, especially the first one, they're just getting their feet wet. By Return of the Jedi, a lot of those special effects still hold up pretty well, like the space fight stuff anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Then then you skip ahead to the prequel movies, and that's the dawn of the digital era. And once again, Lucas is on the front edge of that. I remember with one of them, I'm trying to remember which one. Was it the Phantom Menace, or the Attack of the Clones, or Revenge of the Sith? One of those three. He shot, I think it's the Phantom Menace, that he did one shot as a test shot on digital, for the first time, digital, quote unquote, film versus 35 millimeter film.
Yeah.
And then told anybody, I defy anybody to tell me which shot it was. like trying to test to see if the technology was plausible yet, digital photography as opposed to, because he's just interested in those kinds of things. And so obviously you get a lot of the CGI that people complained about. There's a heavy use of it that's obviously not present in the original films. And then, you fast forward another 10, 11 years. Well, computer technology, as people often talk about famously, is exponential in its improvement and growth over time. So if, you look at, something like, the Phantom Menace, and a lot of the digital stuff that could probably use a cleanup. I know the DVD, like if you look at, I think they did do some cleanup on it because it looks a little washed. It looks a little not, I mean, it's obviously cartoonish at times. By the time you get to the new films, they've gotten so good at it that the digital stuff is just, it's another thing. And then of course they brought back famously marketing wise, you say brought back. One of the things I've read out there that's fascinating to recall is that there were more practical effects shots in the prequel films than there were in the sequel films.
Really?
That for all the hoopla around, we're going to use practical sets and all that. And they did. I don't mean that they didn't. And that first film in particular, The Force Awakens, was so cleverly marketed following that Red Letter Media guy. I'm trying to remember his name, Mike something or other, but they do. I mean,
I missed
he
all
did
this.
all the. Oh, he did all these reviews of the Star Wars. I mean, he kicked off the whole YouTube culture that we're basically participating in on a very low rent level, where you take, where you take like a film, like The Phantom Menace, and chop it up and basically put together an essay where you're speaking over it and showing scenes and interjecting humor. I mean, he invented the form, essentially. I mean, like a long form essay about a film. If you've not seen them, you really should. I mean, they are impressive takedowns of the prequels and their flaws. I will say, I think, at the time when they first came out, it was like, man, this guy is really just nailing it. Like, what is wrong? Why these movies did not work the way that the original films worked. Having said that, I think, one of the things that I don't say he himself did, but he captured something that then got fetishized because a lot of people felt this, which is that there was an over-reliance on digital effects and digital sets, and that you had actors walking in front of green screens and blue screens, and there was very little in the way of interacting with like actual physical sets for these guys, as opposed to like if you obviously watch the way that the original films were made, and that led to a certain degree of like, it's difficult for an actor to be told, as an adult, like maybe with a little kid, you can say, look, pretend that you see this city and everything else, and they can just go dive right into it. But adults, the more that you can kind of build a literal world around them with physical sets, the more it allows them as actors. I think, it's easier to get into character and think of yourself as this character. So, if you have wooden performances in the prequels, there's some notion, and I don't think it's totally incorrect, that is at least partially to do with the lack of physicality of the sets. But that notion was fetishized to the point of, as I said earlier, it became the centerpiece of the marketing of The Force Awakens for like a year's worth of buildup. Like, oh, we're going back to original filming techniques. J.J. Abrams made a big deal. We're filming this on 35 millimeter film stock. We are not using digital film. We are, we're building a Millennium Falcon set. Han Solo is going to be traipsing around that set, all that stuff. And the films especially that first one, looks tremendous. I mean, it really does. Like, they did a good job. If it looks more kind of like what the originals looked like. Having said that, that's partially because they didn't have an original thought in their heads. All they thought was, we just want to, like, this guy, Mike, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his last name, Mike something, but his Red Letter Media, and the reviews, the Plinkett review, Plinkett reviews. He got everybody of a certain age, our age, hepped up on the notion that, the prequels were just George Lucas playing with digital toys. And I don't even think that was entirely his intent, because his criticism goes well beyond that. But that became the primary focus. And so in marketing them, it's like, oh, we're going back to like the original look and the original feel, and no more of that junk. But coinciding with that was that we're literally going to give you pretty much the original movie too. Like we're not going to come up with anything new or different. We're going to give you, I mean, if you watch The Force Awakens, it is almost a blow for blow or plot point for plot point remake of A New Hope, with a little Empire Strikes Back thrown in. I mean, it's really, to me, for a franchise that's marked above all else by the imagination and creativity that George Lucas brought to it, that film is an insult to what the entire concept was. And when George Lucas in that Charlie Rose interview spoke about how Disney wanted to make, because they asked him after he sold, like what his ideas were for sequel movies. And he has apparently some wacky ideas. I mean, at least wacky to the, you know, people going like, well, that's kind of different. That's weird. That's strange. I don't know if that's, you know, they wanted something. I mean, they paid $4 billion for the franchise. They wanted something they could take to the bank, tried and true. And that's how they made their movie. And George Lucas said, you know, well, they wanted to make a nostalgia movie, and I don't like nostalgia movies. I work really hard to make all of my movies different. And as I said with the Indiana Jones films, when we did those, this is why in the end, I actually, in watching all 5, I actually gave my preference to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull over The Last Crusade, because I see what Lucas is talking about. He's more responsible for the content of The Last Crusade, but we can say that that was a reaction to everybody, like the Temple of Doom and how poorly that was received at the time. So they wanted to, like, you know, kind of set things right. But Kingdom of the Crystal Skull actually takes the franchise someplace different and is in keeping with that spirit, which I associate very heavily with someone who's truly a creative genius, that they don't just sit there and repeat what they've already done ad nauseum, that they are all like, somebody who's really a creative genius is always, in a sense, going to disappoint his or her audience, because they may be sitting there going like, well, you know, I want you to just keep playing Piano Man or, you know, whatever forever, if you're Billy Joel, or, you know, the Beatles, like whatever, you know, whatever song it is, I want that forever. And they're going to say like, no, I'm bored of that. I didn't been there, done that. That's in the past. I need to do the next thing, you know? So anyway, sorry, that was a long speech, but it sets the table for how we would, I think, talk about the prequels.
Yeah, because I do want to get back to, and we will cover the final 3, what may end up not being the final 3 films. And I think no matter what, I'm always going to have a bit of, I'm not going to be as dramatic in my takedowns of any of the films, but there are things that when we talk about those final 3 versus these 3, it was really interesting rewatching the first 3 and looking at it maybe with not a critical eye, but looking at it, just really assessing the films. And the one thing that stood out with the 3 films, and I remember seeing this and not really paying attention to it, the original 3 films really didn't go into the lore. It was a very small snapshot of what is this massive backstory. And I remember watching these 3 over the last 2 to 3 weeks before we recorded this, and really having to read and digest and really understand the politics that went into this. Because what I came away from these 3 films was this whole storyline they tried to condense into 3 rather long films. Those 3 those 3 films did not allocate enough time to get in the storyline that made up what they tried to accomplish from Phantom Menace to Revenge of the Sith. And there were some things in there that I pulled away from in that film that I was really impressed with, or in those series of 3 films. And there was things I pulled away from that I felt like were a complete failure that I hadn't really noticed before. But if we start with Phantom Menace, I think where we see this over-reliance on I guess, digital technology, and I think it's painfully obvious. It's that sort of reliance in the storyline on is it the Gungans? Am I getting that right?
Right.
And the prolific presence of them as one of the major, you know, warring factions in that first film. And I really did struggle with that society, that civilization, the way they were designed, their behavior, their decision making. You know, Jar Jar Binks is an easy target for anybody who's reviewing this film, because it is such a garbage character that absolutely adds 0 value to the film. But when you look at like just little things, like, you know, this outcast meets the Jedi early in the film, and by the end of the film, he's now a general who doesn't know what the hell he's doing on the battlefield. So it really makes me question the Gungans' decision making as a society. But it's just, you know, those, if you were to remove that element, or if you were to tone down the cartoonish nature of the Gungans, I think this elevates the Phantom Menace film exponentially. Now, that's not to say it's perfect, and there aren't issues in other, you know, the story arc with meeting Anakin and the pod race. Of course, that has similar issues, and I'll go into that. But for me, the Gungans, that whole element really kills a lot of what is positive in that film.
It's funny that you bring that up. I mean, it's interesting. First of all, do you recall we actually saw this movie together?
I know. I was about to mention this. It was.
Yeah. You, Daniel, and I. Daniel, for those watching, is my cousin and a mutual friend of. Well, obviously, my cousin, but Sean also spent. We spent a lot of time together in our teens and 20s. And what I remember is that we went to see it, and I remember, I forget which one of us drove, either you or Daniel, but driving back, talking about the film and generally being positive with it. I think we all kind of had a bit of a shell shock about Jar Jar, which everybody did at the time, and was like, what the heck was that? But aside from that, being generally positive about the film, and we were being very studious about getting back to Daniel's house because there was a Sixers playoff game that night that we had recorded. And
I forgot all about this.
We plugged our ears to make sure, like, we had to run out of that theater because, you know, Sean was like, you were the leader of this. Like, we don't want to hear anything about that Sixers playoff game.
No, not at all. That's the thing with me. I don't want to know anything about a game that I've recorded. There's no point watching it if I know the results.
Absolutely. And so then we got back to Daniel and we watched it on tape delay as if it hadn't happened. It was like really, and of course this was before phones and things like that, so it's a little bit easier to pull that off. But anyway, yes, I remember our initial reaction in the theater was, Jar Jar, what's going on? Over time, I will say that, you know, now, like, the first few viewings, Jar Jar was like, oh man. But, you know, I've kind of gotten used to it. Like, you know, it's coming. It's no longer a surprise. I do agree that toning him down would certainly have benefited the film in certain ways. What I know, I think, about Jar Jar are three things that leap to mind, and I'll put them in increasing order of annoyance. The bit where he steps in the poop and smells the fart. I mean, these were like, you know, I know that George Lucas intentionally made this film. And that's one thing that at the time he had little kids, you know, kids who were just old enough to. And I think he was thinking about them with them in mind. This is his movie. He's allowed to do what he wants. And I think he kind of was like, what would make them laugh? And, you know, that's always a reliable laugh getter. For the, you know.
Even now as a grown-up, a fart makes me giggle. Yeah. I will always, if I hear a fart in a video on YouTube, then I'll rewind it. Be like, did I just miss a fart? I want to hear that.
Well, see, that's where you and I differ. I mean, like, I don't mind it in real life because in real life, you know, humor is unexpected and you just kind of got to roll with where it is. I expect more out of things that someone has had time to sit down and think about and write. You know, it doesn't take any imagination whatsoever to go on a page, you know. And so
you laugh at what you laugh at. You don't control that. It's a natural reaction. You can't judge what you decide to find funny.
Well, we can get into we should do a podcast episode on the 10 best scatological jokes in films. Like, I honestly think that would be a good subject because I can think of a clear number one because it's clever, and mostly that's what they lack is a certain cleverness. And the one I'm thinking of is absolutely number one. And hint, it came out 2 years before the Phantom Menace. Everyone's wondering what I'm thinking of, but leaving that aside, so those little moments, they were kind of not very Star Warsy. You know, no one went to the bathroom in the first. There was no poop in you know, in the original 3 films.
No.
At that time, honestly, there was sort of a gentleman's agreement, I think, in Hollywood, for lack of a better term, that, you know, if you go back to movies and before, and certainly before there was the Hays Code, which would have prevented it, but even in the 70s when things were loosening up and there were PG and R-rated, generally speaking, especially for things that had a certain degree of expectation that children would be seeing them, that you didn't get into that. You didn't go and, like, just make stinky jokes, because the idea is that, like, you know, kids will do that amongst themselves without any prompting, of course, but that they ought to, when you're giving them something to read, entertain them, develop their mind, you need to try to elevate their mind, not like sink down to where they are.
Yeah.
It's completely gone. Every animated film now, like that's intended for children, has at least one poop or fart joke in it, if not several. So,
I don't have a problem with that as such. If Jar Jar Binks was used as comic relief, as sort of
which he
the
is,
way,
mostly I don't mind it, but
but
that little bit annoys me. But
yeah, it's because that's kind of in a way C-3PO was never a serious character at any point. He served his use, I think, twice in the entire franchise,
right.
and even then, if we go to the Ewoks, he was kind of shit at dealing with that in and of itself. But
right.
Jar Jar being a bit of a joke or a bit of an outcast character, that's fine. But he was a key player in, written as a key player in this journey, in this, somebody who was helping along the way that people chose, who were intelligent. We need to bring Jar Jar with us to this really important Senate thing. And yeah, Jar Jar, of course. Why wouldn't you have Jar Jar? He's clearly the best diplomat we can choose to sit on our floaty thing. Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
But even like if we look at the second episode, or in that episode when they're trying to like build the pod racer, he's just making everything worse. And Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, they're really intelligent, wise people, and yet they keep bringing Jar Jar with him, and he does nothing but fuck things up. And the more I watch it, the more I'm like, oh, just get rid of Jar Jar. Not because of his character, but because of the decisions they would have made to keep him there and to carry him around. They left Anakin's mother on the planet because she was too much of a burden. That's that's different. Anakin's mother, fuck her. She can stay there as a slave. Jar Jar, you coming, buddy? I don't get that.
Well, listen, that Red Letter Media dude that I keep referring to, the Plinkett reviews, makes the point that Obi-Wan has the best line of the movie. I think we've picked up another pathetic life form. Or don't tell me up another pathetic life, or whatever it is. Something about pathetic life form. I mean, and he's not wrong, and the point you're making is not wrong. And by the way, so I said, like, in ascending order of annoyance, the fart poop thing is just sort of like personal. Like, I don't mind the comic relief. You need to have that there for the kids. And even in any good, even if it's not for the kids, like, if you watch really well constructed, tense dramas, there's almost always, if it's not like hilariously knee slapping, you got to break that tension up. It's hard to just build tension straight. So having something to break it up and having a little humor is totally, appropriate.
There was 2 belches in Jedi.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not like unheard of.
Right, belches
3
used to be okay. That was the line. That was the line you could go belch. This end fine, that end not.
That's exactly right. Because actually, now that I think of it, now that we're talking about toilet humor in Star Wars, in Jedi, actually there was 3 belches in the first hour of the film. There was the frog, or whatever the fuck that thing was. There was Jabba. He belched when he ate that frog thing, frog associated, and the Sarlacc, was that what is it? The
Sarlacc, the thing that
he belched when he swallowed. That's 3 belches in the first hour, and it's an interesting point. Like belches, they're like, yeah, that's fine, but if it's out of if you fart, if it's like anything shit related, it's like, that's a bit over the line, fella.
In
that's
1983,
the franchise.
But by 1999, standards had slipped.
Yeah.
But so to finish this thought, the second thing that annoys me with Jar Jar is not so much Jar Jar, although he's a key player in it, but that opening sequence, they meet Jar Jar, and then it's like, well, we got to go first to the Gungan City. We go to the Gungan City. That's basically fine. We're establishing who Jar Jar is and his world and how he's an outcast there. Okay, you have to get kind of past the way they all talk because it's hard to understand. But once now I've seen the movie enough, that's fine. Then it's like, well, you got to go through the planet core. And then they have the same sequence effectively twice in a row where they're going through the planet core and they're being chased by a big fish, and then a bigger fish comes and eats it.
Yeah.
Then there's a brief cut to something else, and then we go back and we do the same thing again. Like where a big fish is chasing them and some other bigger creature comes along and eats it. And I still, every time I watch that, I cannot get it. Why is this here twice? Like, who was the editor on this? Because the movie's already, it's the shortest of the prequels. but it's that you're at a point in the film where, okay, doing it once to make the point, going through the planet core is dangerous, and it's a bit of an exciting action sequence, and getting Qui-Gon the little line, there's always a bigger fish. Okay, all great.
We got
Do
it done.
once.
Got it done.
Why the second time? But
Yeah.
again, Jar Jar, is carrying on through all of that, and it makes it more annoying when you do it twice, when you only needed to do it the once.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And then the last thing is what you were saying, and it's not just Jar Jar, and it's really a theme in the film if you think about it. That's really bizarre. And the question is, why is it there? And it's so persistently there in almost every plot point, like all the different threads running through the film, as to make you wonder, well, this has almost got to be intentional. And what's the point?
Yeah.
And it is this. As you pointed out, Jar Jar is a terrible general. Every single bit of success he has during the course of that battle is purely accidental, right? I mean, and it's done purposely. It's done
Slapstick.
very big and for laughs. It's slapstick.
Yeah, Three Stooges go to war. That's Jar Jar.
Right. Now, that has two, I think, thematic. If you want your audience to take the material somewhat seriously, that you have this, proto-empire thing, right? This trade federation that has these. I think the most effective shot in the film actually is the opening of that battle sequence where those big landers come down, and then you just see the mechanized thing where the droids are like, the things come out and expand, and then the droids come down, and it's this kind of like, it's a really well done shot of like, there's kind of a terror to it. Like, look at this mechanized army that they can just pull out thousands and thousands of droids and put nothing on the line except some money, and they are now going to go try to destroy this indigenous people, for lack of a better term, right? Like, that's actually really effective stuff. And then it turns into silly slapstick. And the only reason they win is because, eventually, between Jar Jar goofing off and accidentally killing a bunch of robots, but then it's Anakin, decides to fly the ship up into the control ship, and every other line is oops, whoops, and then he doesn't even know what he's doing. He accidentally blows up the control ship. And then here we go and use the most over cliched plot point in film. And the first place I can remember seeing it is in Independence Day, but it is used like in every film of this sort, where you want to have a giant army, so overwhelmingly large that there's no way this little tiny force could ever beat it. Except if you have this button that you can push, where if you just hit the right thing, their entire army gets it. And so we play that game, but we don't even do it intentionally. It's just, this button, it's cool.
But that's a Star Wars thing. And actually, 1 second, I'm going to pause really quick. Hold on 1 second. So the thing, so talking about that, when you mentioned that whole push button, that one button thing, and there's this simplification that you see in sci-fi that really stood out to me this time. And when you talk about that scene, and even if we were to think about Anakin as a child who's never flown a ship, clearly he's gifted and has next level force, which allows him to do whatever he wants. And you can get away with that thematically because of his unprecedented ability and understanding of the force. But between that and like the pod race, between that and the pod race, I always kind of get a giggle when, his technical prowess is down to about moving power from one thing to another with a single switch. And that's all he did in both the pod race and flying that ship. And it's that oversimplification of how these things work. And I think a lot of that comes into play when, even Jar Jar, he's fighting by having a droid stuck to his leg and he's kicking it and it's magically shooting. There's a lot of things that are just quite mystical that are happening for this win to happen, this great defeat of this massive army. And it is a very much a regurgitated theme in a lot of films. You mentioned Independence Day, 100%. It's the same sort of thing. You have this against all odds and shit's happening that's not meant to be, but it's destined.
Sure. I guess what I object to, I object to just think harder, like, you know what I mean? Like that. And in 1999, Independence Day was only 3 years old and was fairly fresh in the minds, I think, of audiences that, they had pulled that stunt of how do we stop this overwhelming alien invasion? Well, if you just hit the mothership, all the other ones will, and then it's like, George Lucas saw that movie, he's like, great idea, and just borrowed it. Now, I mean,
I don't know. I would say the Independence Day one that was a little bit more clever. The whole computer virus thing.
Oh,
kind
you're
of
right.
got this sort of vintage feel. I know you're talking about the
No,
Dennis,
you're 100% right. I forgot about the computer virus thing. Oh yeah.
which Independence Day. I had as a younger person. You evolve as you get older and you become more specific about things you like and don't like. And that film, I loved that film when it came out. I really enjoyed it. At that time, I wasn't as naive to some of the Hollywood cliche, and that film was just loaded with it. Even like, we're not doing a review of that film, but I thought that film did a Hollywood blockbuster against all odds alien film at the time really well. Now, would I say the same thing now? Probably not, but I thought there was really clever components in that film.
Sure.
That's where they've taken sort of a standard against all odds story and they've interjected a few little clever things. I feel like in Star Wars, in the Phantom Menace, the against all odds was sort of, rushed. And I felt like it had to be rushed. And that kind of goes back to my overall theme that 3 films wasn't enough time to get a quality story out of what they were trying to condense.
I feel like there's a yes and no there, but leaving that aside just for the moment, you mentioned the pod race in the Phantom Menace, which honestly, I know people have sometimes complained that seems to go on forever. I actually think that's the most effective overall set piece. I mean, it's the center of the film for a reason. And yes, of course, but this doesn't bother me. I mean, the pod race is most definitely.
I can get by with it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but it's also a callback to like something like Ben-Hur, like the chariot race in Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
I mean, but like that to me is Lucas has always been engaging in pastiche, where he's just taking, elements from his favorite movies and ideas from all of his favorite movies growing up, and then reassembling them into something that's uniquely his. That's like a legit, especially in postmodern. If I obviously study a lot of lit theory. So for the lit theorists out there, like in the postmodern idiom of narrative construction, I find that to be completely fine. And the pod race, for the most part, I actually think to be pretty good. And the reason I'm talking about it is because you were saying, well, Anakin doesn't demonstrate a whole lot of real skill. It's just flip the button and change the power. But you know what? Star Wars in general is not Star Trek. Right. No. Star Trek is the one that really is science fiction in the strictest sense, where although there's a lot of techno babble in it, where you can tell the writers are just making, obviously, because the technology doesn't exist. So they're making up words and throwing them around. The reality is there is some thought given in the Star Trek series to how these things would technically work. I mean, obviously, you have to create some technologies that don't exist, but like how, like that there's an engine room in a ship and like it needs this type of fuel and it needs to and there's some real thought to like the engineering that would go in. Star Wars is only space fantasy. It's a setting to tell the story. It is not, if you're coming to it looking for technological, precision, this is not, you've come to the wrong place. So the fact that like what all the pod race is demonstrating for me is what we're told in the original films, which is that when I first met your father, he was already one of the best pilots in the galaxy. And what was surprising about the prequel films, I think we've kind of lost over time. When the Phantom Menace first came out, I don't know about you, but when I saw that they were going to start with Anakin Skywalker being 8 years old, I remember being I would have figured they would have started with him being more like a Luke Skywalker age, not a child. Yeah. And so how do you reconcile like some of the things that Obi-Wan says with the reality of, he's obviously supposed to be like in his, like, let's say, end of his graduate studies, essentially as a Jedi. So like mid-20s. How does a mid-20-year-old person become friends with an 8-year-old? That's not how you relate to an 8-year-old when you're 25. Yeah. But you can say like, look, he's already, look at the piloting skills. Like, look that he can win this chariot race at 8 years old. Like, that's all fine to me. And the fact, so why then in the last sequence, when he hops into the ship, is he like, I think I would have made more of a point, in keeping with what we're told in the original trilogy, that either he already has some experience flying, let's say, ground-based or planet-based ships, or that he's so gifted with the Force that he's able to translate the skills that he does have, like with these pod racer things or whatever, into flying an actual ship really quickly. Like I would have had a little scene where he goes up, and I think they do kinda, where he's talking to the pilot and the pilot's saying, well, this is this and that is that. Like, and then like maybe him being like obviously precocious with it and saying, well, isn't that and isn't this and can't you do, so that it's like somebody could turn around and go like, wow, like you're really picking up, just to give the point that this is skill. And if it's a special gift talent that not everybody has because he has the Force, it's still it's intentional. It is not this kind of like, well, I wonder what this does, which is just bizarre.
I don't have any issue with that. I have no issue with that at all. I think it's more to the point that it is, Star Wars, and I think the Star Trek reference is a great one, because Star Trek is very much about the detail. For instance, Jar Jar would never even make Starfleet Academy. He wouldn't be promoted in any hierarchy. Whereas
he would be a red shirt if he got onto it at all.
He wouldn't be anywhere near it. He would be a red. Sorry, I didn't pick up the reference straight away. Red shirt. Yeah, he would be red shirt completely.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. But these are things like the pod race scene. The only thing that I think that the one thing I wanted to say with the pod race scene, I remember in the theater, the first scene that I really recall being like and this goes back to the fact that Lucas is not completely free of nostalgia, because the pod race scene had a nostalgia scene with the sand people shooting the pods. Sure. And I remember that scene because you hear them go, and I thought that was a great little add-in.
I agree.
I thought that was a nice little thing for the Star Wars fan to see, and that was a nostalgia scene.
But you see the difference there. Like that's just a little touch, it's
a flavor,
3 second, like it's a spice exactly on top. It is not like the entire arc of the plot, the way.
Sorry. But I think one thing I wanted to say before I forget it is what the original films suffer from, that I think, and we'll touch on it later, the actors and acting, forgetting the script and the storyline in, let's say, the final 3 films versus the first 3. And there's some really well casted people in the first, second, and third film. But the actor who played young Anakin, and Hayden Christensen, I really struggle with the acting. It's distracting at times. Like when he's in the ship at the end, that scene we're talking about, he's like, what's this thing doing, R2? Oh, here we go. Like it's just, it's almost like you could have Goofy in that seat and it would, be the same lines delivered in the same way.
Well, and Jake Lloyd basically left acting because of the amount of abuse he took from fans. And I think that's wrong, obviously. I mean, first of all,
well, now I feel like shit.
But I mean, and also it's not his fault that's what he was given to do. Because it's not like Jake Lloyd got on set and was like, well, George Lucas, I see you've written this character to be a somber, serious, force what's the word I'm looking for? Force cognizant child or whatever. Yeah. But you know what? I've got this great idea. I'm just going to ad lib some stuff here. Like, he wasn't given that kind of power. Obviously, he was told this is what you're doing, and then that's what he did.
But this is what happens when I'm questioning.
Yeah. Well, I don't think so, because I remember at the time the big Haley Joel Osment, right? He's the kid who did The Sixth Sense.
Jerry Maguire was his big thing. He was the kid with the big, isn't it? Isn't that who it is? Oh, no. I'm getting that mixed up with somebody else. Yeah, Sixth Sense is Haley Joel Osment. Yeah. Right.
And I remember at the time people making the comparison. I don't forget exactly when The Sixth Sense came out, but between Jake Lloyd's performance in the Phantom Menace and Haley Joel Osment in that film, which by the way, I've never actually seen, but like how effective Haley Joel Osment was versus Jake Lloyd. But I know I'd never seen the film, but I know that the film takes itself somewhat seriously. And that if you tell a kid actor, like, this isn't a joke. This isn't like, like, how did I do this? Blah, blah, blah. That is George Lucas's decision. That was not Jake Lloyd's decision. Jake Lloyd gave George Lucas what he asked for. What he asked for is what I'm questioning. Having said that, I'm not one to go after George Lucas much, but this is one that does flummox me. Like, why? Because again, it's obviously a decision too. It's not just like, I wasn't like with Jar Jar, you might say, well, I thought this was funny, but if you don't agree, okay. Like if it were isolated to the Jar Jar stuff, you could say like, maybe it's just, someone's sense of humor not really jiving with the material or maybe I'm not appreciating. But like, it's a theme. Jar Jar is goofing off and they win the battle. Anakin Skywalker is like, doesn't know what he's doing, but somehow he destroys it. So this notion that now you could say that the theme is, well, even though these people are inexperienced and they don't have obvious training or skills to do these things, if this is how powerful the force is, that there's the force underlying it. But I think in general, that's not the vision you get of the force from, say, the original films, where, Luke Skywalker clearly has some talent, but it's first of all established that he was a pilot a little bit on his home planet of Tatooine. And then The Empire Strikes Back spends lots of time showing you that he has to be trained. That it's not just like you fall out of bed. I mean, you could be LeBron James, right? And you're built, you're born, just turns out your body's 6'8", you're really quick, you have great leaping ability. And all of that will get you so far. But LeBron James is a great basketball player because he works at it too. Like, it's not enough. And that's the point that is made clearly in the original films. And here it just, even if you think about the original Star Wars, okay, Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star, and you could say, well, he didn't really have much in the way of training prior to going to like that. That's way over what he had previously experienced. True enough. But the idea is a little bit like his natural abilities, the adrenaline of the moment. It's taken seriously enough that you can buy it. When you put an 8-year-old kid with like, I'm just goofily hitting buttons and I absolutely accidentally happen to hit the right one that blows everything up, it kind of wrecks the vibe of the thing.
And I don't, and that's the thing. Outside of you really making me feel like shit about bagging on this kid, who I think turned to drugs at the. I don't know if that's exactly the case, but
he's watching this right now and he's crying.
He is completely watching this. Yeah, listen, I'm sorry. I'm a shithead. But putting that aside, it's the decision. You could have easily had him in the film be closer to 14, 15, 16.
Correct.
Which I think. When I watch it, what distracts me about having an 8-year-old is an 8-year-old in that position and you could put it down to naivety or the fact that the force is so strong with him. He doesn't let his feelings get the best of him, but he's in a traumatic warlike situation. And it is a bit of almost like comedy relief in a very poignant moment. And he's taken out helped take out the main ship. So he's a key player in this, and he's just sort of bouncing around and doing what an 8-year-old does. And it's like, man, the Empire is really, or the Trade Federation is really shit that this 8-year-old kid could just sort of stumble into to a space that he could make such an impact to take down a whole battle cruiser. But I think that's the decision of having an 8-year-old. And the other thing with having an 8-year-old that I had to Google this was the age separation between Anakin and Padmé.
Oh, I know. Right?
Which is 14, a segue.
I think is supposed to be.
So when you look at it, they do make it justifiable. It's not what's the R word for it? It's not where he's too young and she's too old. I forget what it is. Anyway, it's the nasty thing that's illegal where if you're too old and you date somebody who's too young, I forget the word.
Statutory rape.
Statutory, yes, that's the word. Yes. Yeah, which is not a word you could say on YouTube, but we don't get paid anyway, so who gives a shit? But if you had him a bit older, if there was like a 4 or 5 year, maybe even because I think there's actually a 6-year age gap. They had to make Padmé really young. As sort of the strong queen in the first, and she was her character was at its peak in the first one. Now, as we go into, in my opinion, Attack of the Clones, which we should probably segue into, and Revenge of the Sith, she devolves substantially.
I agree.
And it's
completely.
the most disappointing part of one of the most disappointing parts of it for me. And we catapult forward 10 years. I think it's 10 years later, where the storyline in Attack of the Clones, when I watched the first 3, that was the hardest one for me to sit down and enjoy. This second going around, I actually really quite enjoyed Attack of the Clones because of the things that were happening in the storyline and the character Palpatine in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, he's tremendous.
It was the best story arc in my opinion in all of the Star Wars series. His influence of how he's pulling the strings and how you can even equate back to his connecting Anakin and Padme. And the thing I loved about this sort of, I'm going to put these two together because I look at these as two films, the Phantom Menace and then Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, to me are one giant film. And when I look at that sort of progress of Palpatine, that evolution, the way they wrote him and his discussions of Anakin about the Force made me question, the integrity of the Jedi as a watcher, because he kind of did that Al Pacino devil's advocate thing where
that's a good comp.
He made an argument for the devil in that film that made you go, well, the devil doesn't sound like he's that bad a guy. I'm a people person, baby. It's like that whole thing. It's like,
that's
you're
not
right.
a bad Pacino imitation either.
No,
you're on a roll here.
I went with it. But his character even convinced me that, you know what, the Jedi are getting kind of politicking here. They're getting too involved. The Senate has made a decision and now they're going to step in, this like military sect, this like, special forces, this religious sect. They're going to say, we need to step in now and we need to take charge. And the way he describes, look, good and bad is a subjective thing. The Force can bring people back to life. The Jedi who one of the things they say in the film, Sith only deal in absolutes, yet the Jedi are the ones who are dealing in absolutes when it comes to the Force. So he's made an argument that makes you really quite. Now, at the end of the day, Palpatine is clearly a dictator and somebody who wants power and control, but he makes an argument that brings into question the legitimacy, or not legitimacy, but the integrity of the Jedi, that makes you able to question the Jedi and I thought that was brilliantly done in the second and third film.
No, certainly Ian McDiarmid's performance really through all three is the highlight of those films.
Yeah.
I want to go back. I agree, because of just timing. We got to start talking about Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And it's interesting that you kind of consider them one long movie. To a large extent, I think you're onto something with that. But just to put a point on the Phantom Menace, and I, for years, really was in the camp of, Hayden Christensen, again, I think was put in a difficult spot, that he was, because of having set the Phantom Menace 10 years prior to the action of Attack of the Clones. Now, instead of having 3 movies, as Mark Hamill did as Luke Skywalker, to develop his relationships with Yoda, with Obi-Wan, Obi-Wan 3 movies, Yoda 2, and then Leia and Han 3 movies. He only had 2 movies to do it, and that's limited screen time. So what ends up happening, especially in Attack of the Clones, is there's a lot of telling rather than showing. Right? Like, I'm in love with you, I love you, all that stuff. Like, I'm haunted by the kiss you should never have given me, and all this really wooden dialogue, because they got to rush it. They got to get through it. And if you had just if Hayden Christensen could have been the kid cast, of course he would have been younger, but in the Phantom Menace, you could have had a more natural progression, especially with his relationship with Obi-Wan, which in Revenge of the big problem to me with Attack of the Clones is, if you're trying to make these films seem like they fit with the originals, Obi-Wan telling Luke, when he first speaks of Anakin, about how he was this and this and a good friend. So much of what you see in Attack of the Clones is like, they're not friends at all. Yeah. So, like it's father with a teenage son kind of relationship, where eventually then they kind of get around that and correct it in Revenge of the Sith to some degree, but I don't know, it changes things. Having said all of that, the reason why I wanted to go back and touch on the Phantom Menace for just a second is actually my ex-wife convinced me, Anna, that there's a reason why Anakin is 8 in the Phantom Menace, is because a big part of his motivation throughout the prequel movies is the loss of his mother.
Yeah.
And it would be unbecoming of like someone Luke's age to be going like, oh, mommy, I mean, not that you wouldn't miss your mother or whatever, but it's a more powerful concept that an 8-year-old, because of the Jedi's practices, gets ripped away from home maybe before he's ready. And that is what allows the fall, which that actually made, when she said that to me, I was like, you know what, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But back to the prequel, back to the problem of the Phantom Menace, then you do introduce the problem of Amidala. Now, the thing is, she doesn't really need to be in the Phantom Menace. If you think about it, you could do that movie without her. And then just have him meet her in the second film and develop it that way. But since they did, I agree with you entirely that her best film is easily the first of the three.
Yeah.
And her character does devolve, and that's exactly the right word, over the next two films. And one of the mistakes that is therefore is made because, it's all this politicking thing. Lucas wants it to be the point that the Jedi are with the Republic. They stand for democracy. Okay. And as opposed to Palpatine, who's a dictator after power. Yeah. But then how do you explain a 14-year-old who's the head of state? There's only one possible explanation for that. She's the inherited queen. Yeah. Only then they go back and make a point. Well, I was elected queen. Well, who the fuck is electing? First of all, queens aren't elected. No. And second of all, it's not in the traditional sense.
I haven't even thought about it.
Second of all, what planet? Then they deserve to be taken over by the Trade Federation if they're electing a 14-year-old girl queen and head of state. You know what I mean? Like that's like, oh yeah.
Well, you could be creative about the Naboo on Naboo, the citizens of Naboo. I don't know if they're Nabooie or whatever they are. That they are a highly evolved civilization where maybe they have short maturity. Maybe very short. Well, in the third film, she just knocked off anyway, so maybe that was her lifespan.
This is the first time I ever had that thought. Maybe that should have been the thought. Like, because the lamest line in Revenge of the Sith is, she's just losing her. Like we just can't explain it. She just lost the will to live.
We don't know what the hell's going on with her.
Right. Maybe because she's a Naboo and they only live to be 35, and that's
this is why it's hard to not talk about the final two films of that prequel without talking about them together, because if we look at her character, there's a few major misses for me, and it has to do with Padme and it has to do with the Jedi Council. And throughout the film, and I don't know if it's down to the acting, the scripting, or again the condensed nature of it, but Hayden Christensen, Anakin Skywalker, is a complete loose cannon. He has mental health issues. It is clear if he went to a nightclub, every woman would be like, what's up with that freak? If some random in a bar can see that this guy is a freak, why are the Jedi sending him out on these great, crusades? And why is it that as creepy as he is, but as creepy as he is with Padme, like, it is weird. It's cringy how he pursues her. And if she's an intelligent person, from an evolved species in Naboo, she's going to be like, listen, Anakin, let's be friends. You're a fucking freak.
Well, a couple things. First of all, we've established that the Nabooese only live to 35, so their opportunities are limited. Second of all,
he does have a good gene pool in him. He's got the Force. We need to capitalize.
But actually, I disagree kind of strongly with the point you made prior to that, more seriously, that the Jedi don't see that he has problems and are sending him on these grand missions. In fact, that's his beef with them, right? That he thinks he should be getting more than he's getting because of his natural ability, and they're not giving it to him precisely for the reason that you've said, putting the boy, you know what I mean? Like,
but it's not even a debate though. Like they're towards the end of the film. That scene, that scene in the ship when the Yoda with the clone army, right about the time he's about to turn, they say he's supposed to be the one, and then Yoda says something to the effect of, maybe we don't understand the prophecy. Maybe we're wrong about the prophecy.
Right.
Okay. Why did it take Yoda that long to come to that conclusion?
Yes, Yoda does not really distinguish himself in the prequel films.
Because I agree. Like, that's the thing. Like, I feel like the build up, and I have no problem with him being a petulant teen, because maybe that's how Jedis are, as petulant teens, even though the ones that help Obi-Wan find the star system that isn't there are quite mature. But maybe Anakin, he's got some issues, but we see potential in him because he's got unheard of Force, so he clearly has to be part of this prophecy. But I think the way Anakin was played, it was a bit over the top, because there were scenes I thought he was excellent in, Hayden Christensen, when he was seeking revenge for his mother. That was a completely plausible. Like, you could buy into him losing his shit and moving away from the Force when his mother was killed.
Yeah, and I think he does a tremendous job through that whole sequence. I get emotional when I watch it because I do, you know what I mean? Like, and he's completely believable as that, angst-ridden teen.
Yeah.
And it is maybe not what people were expecting of Darth Vader, because people sat around saying, well, like, I don't want to see Darth Vader as an angst-ridden teen.
Yeah.
And, but like, hey, if you're looking at the story arc of someone's life, that can be part of it. And the other thing I always feel the need to say this when Attack of the Clones comes up. So I need to, this is my major hobby horse. Probably the most bitched about thing in the Attack of the Clones with respect to Hayden Christensen are his lines, where he's talking with
Padmé.
Yeah, Padme on Naboo, and I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere, and not like you, or whatever he says next. Of all the things that are in that romantic subplot, like the Star Wars civics lesson where we learned that she was, after she served her 2 terms as queen, like, oh my God. And then now she's elected senator. It's like, shut up, shut up, shut up. Like where you're sitting there and like the bit in the I'm haunted by the kiss you should never have given me, and they're in front of the fireplace. All that's dreadful. That is the one line and thing where I think, wow, they actually did it right. Not only does Hayden Christensen deliver it fine, the line is good. Because it is, yes, it's ham-fisted. Yes, it's silly and stupid. And it's exactly the kind of thing a 16-year-old kid would say to a 22-year-old girl trying to impress her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's really what it boils down to. It's like, it's like him trying to be a little poetic, and, it doesn't land. I mean, it does for a second because she thinks there's something magnetic about, and the problem is that they don't have a lot of on-screen chemistry, the two of them.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to because honestly, in some ways, I hate to say it, I like Natalie Portman as an actress, and there are movies that she turns in tremendous performances, but especially in those last 2 films, she is definitely the least valuable player. She just does not bring it.
It's so confusing because I was saying to my wife, I said, Natalie, I said to her watching the film, I'm like, Natalie Portman's a good actress, right? Like she's talented, isn't she? It's almost like if we go back to LeBron James, like he can't, dribble between his legs all of a sudden. It's just like he can play basketball, can he?
Right.
It was just really weird. And you have to put a lot of it down to the way the script really belittles her character and her intelligence and her courage. Her courage melts away, and she becomes this subsistence little, the person who needs to subsist off of Anakin. Like like he is her world to the point that she can no longer function without him. It's very, anti-modern woman. It's very sort of 1980s needy heroine.
In Revenge of the Sith, it really gets, and I agree. In Revenge of the Sith, they haven't given her much to do other than that. So I will lay that at the feet of the script and follow you in that. The only thing I would say is maybe you give the script a pass slightly, in the sense that in that film, first of all, you got to figure out what to do with her. Yeah. And Luke and Leia have to be born by the end of that film.
Yeah,
and as a result, that means she has to be pregnant, and pregnant women don't generally run around being the leaders of, whatever. So it would have been better maybe to show her as being a little bit more effective politically, because this is a political battle as well as a battle in that third film. The one where she really just doesn't show up is Attack of the Clones. I don't know what to say. I mean, when I watched that film, yes. Were you put in the best situation by the director? No, you weren't. Like, this is the old Andy Reid thing. I got to put my players in a better position to succeed. George Lucas did not do a wonderful job with the script. George Lucas did not do a wonderful job with some of the ways those scenes were staged. But you know what? Hayden Christensen is clearly trying his level best, and she just doesn't. I don't know whether it's because she's just not feeling Hayden Christensen. Honestly, have you ever seen Leon, or what was released in the United States as The Professional?
Yes.
Now, that's an uncomfortable film in some ways, but it's also exceptionally well done.
Yeah.
Where she is a 12, 13-year-old girl who has this crush on this, older man. and it's handled very appropriately where he senses it but keeps her at arm's length, but she is pretty and all that, so like it's a little dicey, especially in the Me Too woke era. It was uncomfortable always, and it deals with a subject that's not, but there she is at 12 and 13. I mean, I forget how old she was when that film was made, not really much older than 12 or 13, I think. And she is
another film like that, though. There's another film she acted in, and I can't remember it. It's got I forget the name of the actor, but this actor comes home after being away for so many years, and she's next door, and she's like this like 12 or 13-year-old who's like this old soul that he keeps talking to every time he leaves the house.
Right.
And there's like this weird connection there that nothing weird happens. I mean, he doesn't do anything, but it's like you could tell this is a young girl who's into this older guy, and this older guy finds it really interesting speaking to this young girl who's an attractive young girl.
Right.
And it had this weird vibe to it, but she was excellent in that film.
Right.
The fact
she's
that I felt
excellent
uncomfortable with it as a 12, 13-year-old.
Right. And she's excellent in The Professional. I mean, she can really indicate crush, you know what I mean? And it's like, then you have an adult man dealing with a crush from a girl that's flattering but inappropriate, you know what I mean? And she does it really well. If you ever seen V for Vendetta, which is a brilliant freaking film, and was made right around the same year as Attack of the Clones, I want to say, like 2002. She has a kind of crushy relationship off and on with the main character. And if you've never seen that film, stop what you're doing and go watch it. It's freaking brilliant. But with the main character in that film, who doesn't even have a face, I mean, she can really communicate that level of emotion. So I don't know. I mean, yes, the dialogue wasn't the best, but you got to bring something better than what you brought in that film. I mean, that's just it.
What really highlights, I think what really highlights maybe the challenges she had was when they were in what's the name? They were on the planet where they were captured, the saving
Geonosis.
Yes, they were on Geonosis, and they were taken to this sort of gladiator arena and tied up, which I have no problem with that scene before the battle breaks out. And she's able to handle herself, which you can make assumptions that she's probably got some midichlorians floating around in there. And she is not, she's some, and even Obi-Wan says, I think Padme's got it covered. It's like, okay, great. She's getting back to being herself, she's fighting, she doesn't need.
Right. No, but that's all fine.
But then she gets, the thing that always bothered me was it was like a child then wrote the next 2 minutes of the scene after she jumps down onto whatever that animal is with Anakin, and she gives him this most awkward manufactured peck on the cheek in the middle of a battle. And it's like, man, there was just something about that every time I see it, it bothers me. Maybe it's the fact that they had a mic and a sound effect of, like it just, I don't know if you remember that, but that scene really drove me bananas every time I saw that.
I'm too distracted during that scene, being driven bananas by all that unnecessary, horrific, comedic stuff with C-3PO to have been bothered by that peck on the cheek. That C-3PO stuff in the middle of that is so dead awful. And I'll tell you, it's taking the thing from the thing I was complaining about with the Phantom Menace, where you have what should be a serious kind of set piece battle, where you're developing a theme of like again, a proto-empire with this high level of mechanization and weaponry, just attempting to steamroll a local population. And that's establishing where the evil is. It's that, we can just come in and technologically wipe people out on like a genocidal level to achieve our ends, and risking nearly nothing to do it. And then you kind of like take the weight that sequence could have away from it by having Jar Jar accidentally, flopping around bouncing stuff. Now
like
take that
said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, take that same problem I identified with that and multiply it by 1,000. I'm supposed to take seriously what a sacrifice the Jedi are making, that the Jedi are these, that the guardians of peace and justice and galaxy for over 1,000 generations, and that they are the ultimate good force in the universe. They're there to make sure that something like Emperor Palpatine or the dark side of the Force doesn't take over, doesn't become the ultimate power of the universe. And there they are coming into Geonosis to rescue Obi-Wan and basically start. This is the place where we are going to start the Clone Wars, right? It is as Yoda says by the end of it, like, begun the Clone War has, right? I mean, it's like this big, And in that, when the battle's done, they show you how many dead Jedi are there. There's a shot later that is supposed to emphasize what's happened to the Jedi. I think maybe this one's in Revenge of the Sith, but where the Jedi Council table's half empty because of all the Jedi who've been killed. But in the middle of this thing where I'm supposed to be concerned, like, look at this, Jedi are being slaughtered. These are the heroes of the universe, and they're being slaughtered en masse by these people. I've got C-3PO going, oh, my head. It's like, what are you doing?
I have to question the manufacturing process as well, that they can just that easily get the head of C-3PO in there. Right. But it's almost like I never thought of it as a Jar Jar Binks thing, and it is completely a Jar Jar Binks thing. It's almost as if Jar Jar came in and said, well, C-3PO, I got this whole, character covered, don't worry about it. And then C-3PO is like, hold my beer in the next film saying, no, I still can be an absolute idiot and distract in this film, because it is completely distracting. It adds awful. Again, zero value into that whole you're just focused on the battle. And this is part of and I'm going to jump into another franchise. This is why I always struggled with Lord of the Rings when the films got on, because you had these meaningful battles and you had like these sort of joking around, like, how many have you killed? 1, 2, it's like, okay, well, this is a very important time for you. And I appreciate you're brave to the point that this doesn't phase you or you don't get tired, but it distracts from what is a significant moment in the film.
Yeah. So, I mean, Attack of the Clones, I think that, because I know we're running short on time. Not short, but we should probably move to Revenge of the Sith. But we're talking about them holistically. But I would say that there are things in Attack of the Clones that are quite enjoyable. The whole mystery thing that Obi-Wan's trying to solve, like, where did this stuff come from? The problem is that it doesn't pay off that much. But like you never really find out who Jedi Master Sifo Dyas is. If you want to know that, you have to kind of track it down in the extended universe stuff. I mean, it's pretty clear it has something to do with Darth Tyrannus / Christopher Lee, who, by the way, is a tremendous addition to the cast. That happens in Attack of the Clones. Count Dooku. Count Dooku.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just the voice. My favorite scene, actually, in Attack, and then I know. But let me just say this about Attack of the Clones. Whenever I watch Attack of the Clones, the best scene in that film by far, and the one that I get the most enjoyment out of, is when Obi-Wan's been captured on Geonosis and Count Dooku comes in to talk to him and says, oh no, my friend, there must be some mistake, and then he basically tells him exactly what actually happened in the Phantom Menace. Like, what would you say that if I told you that 10 years ago, a Sith Lord by the name of Darth Sidious was behind the whole Trade Federation thing, and he lays out the entire plot. But because it's coming from Count Dooku, Obi-Wan's response is, basically, no, that's not what happened. I was there or whatever, because he doesn't believe, like, it's a great little thing. Like, the idea is like, well, he's evil, so anything he says must be a lie. So I'm going to react to it as such, but he's not lying. He's telling him the dead truth. But because Obi-Wan is seeing only that evil thing, he takes it for a lie and misses an opportunity to have a better understanding of what's actually transpiring. And I think it's really kind of a fascinating little psychological back and forth. And it ends with this beautiful line about Count Dooku saying, there may be some trouble securing your release. I mean, the whole, like, there was some dialogue that's beautifully and perfectly written for that sequence. So, there are things in Attack of the Clones, even though, it has these problems that we've outlined, it introduces some of the things that really pay off in Revenge of the Sith.
Well, I think, and I'm okay on time for a while, so it's not like we have to rush through this. So
I'm just thinking half hour for.
We'll just talk. We'll just work our way through it.
Oh, okay.
I think the one, and I'm reminded of things in the film that I really liked, and one thing we've been remiss about. And are you still there, by the way, Dixon?
I am. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So one of the things that I really we've been remiss about is the casting and some of the good that's been there. And I think, if we look at Phantom Menace and then Attack of the Clones, how good Ewan McGregor and what's his name? Balls, I forgot his name. Qui-Gon.
Liam Neeson.
Where and those characters in Phantom Menace, in that opening scene, you know, that was Star Wars. I was excited with that opening scene and
Oh,
seeing
sure,
the Jedi
right.
being the Jedi, and Ewan McGregor, just for me, just helps carry these films.
He
And my
does.
wife and I haven't seen the continuation, the Obi-Wan series, which we're going to be watching probably tonight.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah, we haven't seen that yet. But the one, there was that whole
There are some wonderful things in that, and there are some shaky things in that. But go
well,
on.
we may cover that. I've heard it ends incredibly well. But just before I go into that, the scene with Jango Fett, the scenes with Jango Fett and Obi-Wan, or when Obi-Wan sees the clone army for the first time, and his interactions with Jango Fett, and his back and forth with Jango Fett, the chasing, where he throws the beacon on him, and then he's able to follow him, and then they have that fight around the asteroid field. You know, I loved that interplay between Jango Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know, I think he for me was even this may sound to some sacrilegious, but of all of the Jedi that I've seen, and I do like actually liked Rey's character, which we'll come to later in another show. But Obi-Wan's character was my favorite Jedi of all of the Jedi characters in any of the series.
No, I don't
The
think that's
original
sacrilege
Obi-Wan.
at all. I think he's more or
No.
less supposed to be. Oh, you mean better than
Luke Skywalker.
Alec? Oh, I thought you meant better
Or
than Alec.
or Alec
Guinness.
Guinness was good. I was going to say you could make an argument, or even well, if we talk Jedi, Darth Vader, who is an incredible Darth
Well, he's not
Lord.
a Jedi though. You know,
Well,
he
no,
is, but then he isn't.
Yeah, I'm just saying that flavor of character. But for me, Obi-Wan, coming from the prequels, just, you know, Ewan McGregor, just incredible job. And some of the dialogue at times was trying, and yet he makes it work. He makes it acceptable when the dialogue is not acceptable.
Well, that's what I mean by bringing it. You know, whereas like he brought it, whereas Natalie Portman, I think, just let the crummy dialogue and the adverse conditions, maybe, or the less than, you know, all the blue screening and grease screening. She clearly, I think, let it get to her.
You know what I think it is? I think she saw the Revenge of the Sith script after she started recording Attack of the Clones, and she's kind of like, fuck it, this isn't going anywhere good. I'm turning into some weak sheep. I'm just gonna, you know, I'm gonna coast my way through these next two.
Yeah, maybe so.
But it's yeah. So I mean, you know, I think going to the other thing I wanted to mention, because I did a bit of reading on this, because it's funny how there's so much backstory and lore you can learn. You know, it's almost like there's a de facto history lesson you can take on Star Wars and its politics and its players. And one of the things that I wanted to review or talk about, which I know gets talked about, was Yoda's sandbagging his limp. And I wanted to get your take on that, because for me, I was trying to read the justification for having Yoda be this decrepit, sort of can barely walk with this piece of shit cane. And then all of a sudden he's like this badass ninja who can pretty much take on anybody. And I saw one thing that said, well, he's a Jedi master, so he's reserving his energy, but he's got a fucking limp. It's not like he's walking slow and old. He's got a limp. He's acting like an old guy. I don't know. I was curious what your take is on that, because I feel like they overdid his tomfoolery with his injury. I feel like he's got like some sort of an insurance claim that he's trying to keep up.
Well, I think that's a frequent and valid criticism of Attack of the Clones, that in general, and in general the prequel films. And once again, I keep going back to that Red Letter Media review, Plinkett review. But when he gets to Attack of the Clones, I mean, he has much to say about that, right? And it is like, you know, it's the exchange of the action. It's a bit of fan service, right? Lots of fans out there were like, well, I want to see Yoda. Like, to me, a Jedi is someone who's badass with a lightsaber. It's not someone who's calm and wise and says things like, what is it? In The Empire Strikes Back, he tells him like a Jedi uses the Force for defense, never attack, and speaks like Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid, you know, and that's who Yoda is. Although the Karate Kid came second, so Mr. Miyagi speaks like Yoda. But, you know, that idea of sort of like the wise old trainer who's, you know, no longer driven by passion, but instead driven by, you know, experience, but can do it. I mean, and I understand that there's that part of you, like everybody wants to think, like, see that part, like, well, just because, I mean, what's the best part in the Karate Kid? When one of the best parts, when Mr. Miyagi shows up and helps beat off those guys. Like, he may look like he's old and past his prime, but don't F with him because he still has it, you know, and he is reserving it. So, I mean, I get that and I see it. I think that the limp thing, you know, I guess to me it's forgivable. It's
I
because
can,
it's first of all, it's as elemental a story trope to that kind of story. I mean, Yoda's filling a certain kind of archetypal character, the old wise person who's been there, done that, who's been trained and is now the trainer, who has all the skills, but mostly doesn't use them, but can show others how to do it. But that when need presses him, he will demonstrate what he has. You know, do they go a little far with the limp? But I think they'd already established he had a limp in the originals.
well,
These are supposed to be, I guess you could have like had him not limping around, but I think
I
at
don't
first
mind.
people wanted to see him limping because that's who Yoda is. So then how do you both have him have the limp, but then also pay off the way people expect that to pay off? Which
I
is
don't
that
mind. Oh, sorry. But that's the thing. It does pay off because I think that was a great scene where he just sort of, you know, drops it in front of Dooku and says, all right, you know, I can still roll.
Right.
And then that's great. But I think for me, it was just, it was such, I've always find fascinating those small little things that they put in there that ultimately detracted from it. Because he could have had a cane and he could have just been an old, slow guy who dropped it and went on. But instead he had this awful limp, like he had a replacement knee that needed to be replaced again. And all of a sudden he's doing all of this crazy shit. And like for me, the payoff would have been there had he not been limping around like he just badly injured himself.
Well, maybe he's also intentionally downplaying. That's kind of the way I took it. Like,
no, I think insurance claim is the thing. I think he's on like unemployment or something like that. He's supposed to be teaching full time at that school. He's like, I don't want to do that shit. But he hasn't saved. He doesn't have a pension. He's fucking old.
Maybe it's part of the theme of the corruption of the Jedi. They went from defenders of the Republic and peace and justice in the galaxy to insurance fraudsters. You know what I mean? Like that could be it.
He's not allowed to have a big pension. He's like a monk. He doesn't have a salary. He's 600 years. These Jedis did not prepare for a 600-year-old, whatever the fuck he is, Yoda. So
what? While we're on the subject of Christopher, well, go ahead, please. If you fit it,
Oh no. I was just having a bit of a. I'm just trying to justify Yoda. I think you can perfectly justify Yoda doing some sort of a workman's comp or sort of a pension scheme because he's too old to. The idea that he's too old that his pension isn't going to cover him, and the Jedi haven't necessarily considered it. Right. So he's trying to fake it so he doesn't have to teach full time.
While we're on the subject of Count Dooku, because his movie's really that middle one. He's eliminated very early on in Revenge.
He's very good at it. He's very good at the film.
Well, that's Christopher Lee, and Christopher Lee was a tremendous actor. Passed away a few years ago now.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to first of all give a shout out and show and prove my bona fides here because my dad was a great old horror film buff, and Christopher Lee starred with Peter Cushing in a number of English produced horror films back in the 70s. And that's why, Lucas, he knew Peter Cushing from, for example, they did a Dracula. I think that was their first one together. It was called Hammer Films. It was a British production company. And they did a Dracula together where Peter Cushing was Van Helsing and Christopher Lee was Dracula. And it's very interesting. Christopher Lee is a very interesting take on Count Dracula. It's not the cape and the this and the funny accent. He presents as a big, strong English gentleman. It's a very different, very much kind of alert, a little bit like Count Dooku, who then also happens to be a vampire. That movie, if you've never seen it, is worth a look. But it's just interesting that in the original films, the original film, you get Peter Cushing and he gets a part, and that Lucas went back to that well and got Christopher Lee to be. It was a nice thing to do to kind of bookend them. So I just like to give that shout out. And to those who have not seen any of those, because they were in a number of films together. It was Dracula, and then they did a Frankenstein, but they were sequels to all of those things. And they were both big time British actors who did these horror films together, and they're interesting in their own right. The other thing that we didn't talk about at all with The Phantom Menace, which usually comes up, and it's maybe one of the things, because I'm thinking about The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones now specifically as a pairing. In The Phantom Menace, obviously everyone, I don't know anyone who probably doesn't agree that the single most effective and exciting sequence in The Phantom Menace is obviously the Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon lightsaber battle.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that we didn't talk about that often gets talked about. And I wonder now, 25 years on, and the film is what it is, and the films are what they are, what we think about this. But the Darth Maul in that film is mostly a wasted character. I mean, he's there just to do that lightsaber sequence. And other than that, you don't know anything about him. There's no motivation or anything. And not that he's not going to be the star of the film. I understand that, but he, you don't really establish anything much more than he's like the guy that Palpatine's or that Darth Sidious sends to go follow the Jedi, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's just nothing much established about him.
He seems rather one-dimensional, and he was used in the market, like he was a big marketing pull for that film,
right? And I think that's why there was some disappointment around it, because everyone's like, "Ooh, what's this character?" And then you go there, and there's really nothing to him. In fact, I still joke about it with my son, because whenever we're playing Star Wars figures together, I always have Darth Maul say, like, basically his only line in the film: "At last, we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi." At last, and I have him say that every time as a joke, because like he's got nothing else to say.
That's
right?
it.
And it's like, is that a way? I mean, should he have been killed at the end of the first film? Or should he have gotten away with, he kills Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan maybe chases him off, and then he continues to be the villain through the second film? Would that have been a more effective sequence? Or maybe Dooku should have been introduced, Darth Tyrannus in the first film. And same thing, just like have him go through 2 films. Instead, they have one villain who's killed. I mean, obviously Christopher Lee, the actor, could not have plausibly done what Ray Park did as the actor performing Darth Maul. Did the films lose something? Even though I really enjoy Christopher Lee's performance in Attack of the Clones, would both of them have been better if either Darth Maul had continued through 2 films, or junk Darth Maul and have Darth Tyrannus through 2 films?
I don't think there was anything lost with. I mean, there was intrigue at not seeing any evolution of his character outside of just being some sort of a, lead knight at the end of the day. Almost like an assassin, more so than, let's say, a Sith Lord. For me, I never it was a cool character, but I thought it was it was a superficial character. It was made to look menacing, and it was made to look the part, but there wasn't a lot of substance to it.
And that's what I'm saying. They've kind of wasted the spot, because take this, for example, like when Obi-Wan is investigating where this remember the missing planet, and then that's all sort of interesting. Like, okay, there's a missing planet. Why is it missing from the archives? We're going to go out there. We're going to find it, see what's going on. Then when he gets there, he discovers they're making this clone army, and they treat him like, well, you're the guy who showed up here to pick it up, right? And he's like, oh, yeah, that's right. Tell me some more. And they're like, oh, well, Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas, this person you've never heard of, ordered it 10 years ago. Now, again, if you go and look into it, it turns out that I guess that the backstory, or whatever Lucas's official stuff says that it was actually, I think, Darth Tyrannus who killed this Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas, then posed as him and ordered the clone army, which means that that Tyrannus / Count Dooku was always in league with Palpatine from the jump, as somebody controlling both sides of the equation. Like, in other words, I'm going to control the clone army, and I'm going to control the Trade Federation, and gin up a war where I'm mostly to deliver myself into power. And then once I've accomplished that, then I'm just going to wipe out the Trade Federation, because I control that anyway. But that could be more worked out on screen in ways that would have paid off, I think, very interestingly, to your point about the politics, if you dedicated some screen time to that. But by having Darth Maul in that first film, you get the awesome lightsaber battle. We all love it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't, other than establishing that Obi-Wan's upset, that Qui-Gon has now passed the torch to Obi-Wan. Now he's going to train Anakin instead of as a in remembrance of his master at his master's last request. I don't know. It seems like a wasted opportunity where you could have really worked the plot there, because you're right. I think the most fascinating thing of the prequels is you get a sense of what the political thing is that's going on. It's that Palpatine sees an opportunity he manipulates the Trade Federation into, basically forcing this conflict at his home planet, parlays that into being elected chancellor. Once he's elected chancellor, he then starts a clone army over here and allows the Trade Federation to build power so that it'll have an excuse to deploy the clone army. That's a more effective story, probably, if Count Dooku is not in on the back half of it. If Count Dooku is a Jedi who, as we're told, he was a Jedi in, I think, Attack of the Clones, were told, oh, he was a Jedi. Well, if he's a Jedi who, for whatever reason, like Qui-Gon, we get this hint that Qui-Gon had some issues with the Jedi Order. Count Dooku is one too. And so maybe Count Dooku is this guy who aligns with the Trade Federation, not out of like some duplicitous plot, but rather because he's a true believer and thinks that the Republic has been corrupted by the Sith, which he tells Obi-Wan is the case, and in fact is the case, and that he wants to stop that he's doing this not to be evil, but to be like, he thinks he's doing the right thing. And then Darth Tyrannus, or Darth Sidious / Palpatine is, maybe playing sympathetic to that Count Dooku thing. Like, that's why I need to be in charge because I'm wary of the Jedi too. But secretly, he's also building this clone army to fight the thing that, you know what I mean? Like, there's an idea there that's quite sophisticated and it's hinted at, but it's never fully fleshed out. Like, I'd have to. It's a really complex plot, and I'd have to sit here and write it down to get it exactly right, like all the different relationships. But it would be a really interesting thing to play out. But the problem is, when you waste screen time on Darth Maul and don't even have don't have Count Dooku in part one, you have no time to do it.
Well, Darth Maul, there's one thing that occurred to me with Darth Maul and his character, and when you read Star Wars not fan fiction, sorry, that's not the right word. When you read the actual mythology of Star Wars, and you start to investigate, was the Empire that bad? Just trying to understand what was so bad about the Empire. Were people fed? Did people have jobs? Was there democracy? And the thing I keep seeing as far as what was bad about the Empire is they were a bit speciest or racist in a species perspective.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And Darth Maul did not fit the mold of what the chosen ones ended up being, which is a human-centric Sith Lord like Dooku. I don't know what Darth Maul was, what his species was, but there may have been some biases that he was only ever going to be a foot soldier. He was a thug. He was not somebody who was an evolved character. He was there to drop in there and kick some ass. He had the Force, but that was about it.
Ed, speaking as I did a minute ago, and I'm sure if I read deep, the problem is that the films need to be films. Like, I'm sure if you go and read the backstory, this is probably clarified. As I'm saying it out loud, I think even from the films, if you think about it, it's just not made clear enough. But I think the notion is that Count Dooku / Darth Tyrannus does not know that Darth Sidious, who makes only one appearance at the very end of Attack of the Clones when Dooku gives him the plans for the Death Star or whatever that he escaped with, right? I don't think he's supposed to know that Darth Tyrannus is Chancellor Palpatine.
No, I don't think he does.
And then at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, it's when Palpatine says, kill him, to Anakin when he's got him trapped, that like in that moment where you see like his eyes bulge out, it occurs to him, oh, you're Darth Sidious. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, but that's not really, it's left all to implication and guesswork rather than making that, for all the crummy expository dialogue that's in Attack of the Clones, the thing that really needs to be sort of laid out a little bit more clearly is not.
Yeah. No, I'm processing everything you're saying here because I'm revisiting the film and revisiting Dooku's interaction. And there is going to be an element where I'm trying to figure out what his pathway was there. If he doesn't know Palpatine,
I'm actually going to Google this. Like, what is the opinion of the
Because if he doesn't know Palpatine is who he is, how does he become a Sith Lord? So who is his pathway to becoming a Sith Lord if he doesn't know Palpatine is a Sith Lord?
Well, see, now the internet says, and I don't know whether this is based on Dooku does know that Palpatine is. Yeah, but then if he knows, then he's on. So fine, then he's running the Trade Federation as just a shell game to help Sidious and the Sith gain power.
But that's the same game he used to win Anakin over. It's like, look, we're here doing the good stuff. This trade federation, this is the way forward. We're trying to get rid of corruption. And that was his story to Anakin. Look, you're looking at things as dark side and light side. You're talking about subjective opinions of the Jedi versus us. We want peace. There's similar themes that Dooku's mirroring when he's talking to Obi-Wan.
Right.
It's interesting when you break it down. And the one thing I will say about, and this goes back to what I didn't necessarily get into the first time, and when we prepared to do this show, it's reading the lore behind this, is how much more there is to talk about. And you can complain about the script and the characters, but the backstory that doesn't make the film, or the stuff that's assumed, or the stuff that's talked about. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting things to talk about with this whole storyline and this whole Star Wars universe that takes you into what are the films that we grew up watching.
Yeah. And while we're on this, because let's complete the square here, because there's one of the things that's maybe sometimes frustrating about the prequels is these references to characters who do not appear. Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas, and the other big one, which comes from what to me is the single best scene in all three films, just in terms of its execution and the beauty of the way it's filmed, is the scene in Revenge of the Sith at the quasi opera performance. First of all, the imagination that goes into that idea of whatever it is they're looking at. I'm fascinated by that. Real credit to George Lucas and anybody involved in the creation of that scene. Just that's what an operatic entertainment would look like in this universe, and the bubbles and all of this. It's very creative, very thoughtful. It sets a brilliant mood. And then obviously the dialogue back and forth between Palpatine and Anakin there is just brilliant. Critical to the film. And in it, of course, he mentions, have you ever heard the Sith legend of Darth Plagueis the Wise? And here's again a character. It's heavily implied in that scene that Darth Plagueis's apprentice that he's telling this legend about, that he is Darth Plagueis's apprentice, right? And I believe in the Star Wars lore that is in fact the case, that that Darth Plagueis is supposed to have been his Sith Lord Master. But again, it feels to me like another thing and there it's less so, because you can just pick up from the context clues that that's what's going on. Anakin can't, but you can. Dramatic irony. Yeah. But it's one of those moments where there's this shadowy Sith lore stuff going on. And I'm sure purposely to some degree it's kept shadowy to keep it mysterious. Yeah. But by the same token, there are moments where especially with Sifo-Dyas and how the clone army came to be. And I just think that maybe the whole character arc, Lucas clearly, I think that the Phantom Menace was done very separately from the other two, as you alluded to. I don't know that he had Darth Tyrannus / Count Dooku in mind yet when he sat down to write the Phantom Menace. I think the sequence of films would be improved in the aggregate if you would go back in time. If you were going to remake them, I would cut the Darth Maul character entirely. He does nothing.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Well, no,
and I think he does a younger Count Dooku who could then maybe plausibly do some of the things that Darth Maul does if you want the set piece lightsaber battle, and then just let it end in a draw, or maybe even not quite a draw. Maybe Obi-Wan injures him in the way, cuts his hand off or arm off or something, and he retreats. Then he.
I don't necessarily agree with Darth as little values I think Darth Maul adds. I think he does play a key role in evolving Obi-Wan in a very short period of time to a proper Jedi Master. That's his first big boss that he defeats, so to speak.
But doing it the way I think that having Obi-Wan struggle and then ultimately defeat Dooku, Like, although I guess it's Anakin Skywalker.
So that, and you know, it's interesting you mentioned that scene, because that scene I struggle with a bit, where Dooku makes short order of both Anakin in the second one and Obi-Wan. Part of it is the way they did it was quite poor, because Obi-Wan gets up at the end, and I'm like, Christ, you couldn't have even tried to save your friends. You're just laying there like looking like he broke his arm and leg, and now he's walking off like there wasn't a problem. Like, you couldn't even use the Force. Like, there's nothing you can do to involve. Yoda came and saved the day. I would have very much liked Obi-Wan to make a better accounting of himself in that as a Jedi Master, somebody who survived as long as he ended up surviving. That was a scene that I was a bit disappointed in, even though there was a good payoff with the fight between Yoda and Dooku. I will say, though, there was the most cliche superpower battle that happened, where Dooku shoots him with his Jedi shit, or his his Sith shit, and then Yoda catches it and then throws it back, and it's like, oh man, it's almost like that scream you hear in every film that's just got to be regurgitated. And I just felt like that was a little bit cliche, but outside of that, there was a little bit of a payoff with Yoda.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way that they present, I forgot kind of how easily Dooku dispatches not just Anakin, which was fine for establishing character,
because he was immature. He did well, but he got dispatched.
Obi-Wan probably, you could argue that honestly you shouldn't have used Yoda there at all. Let Obi-Wan like fight him to a draw. Let him withdraw there, and then that, like if you had Obi-Wan doing the same thing at the end of Attack of the only thing is, I'm thinking about the staging. Like, let's say you had Dooku in the first one and the second one, and twice Obi-Wan fights him to a draw. Maybe the second time he injures him. And then the third time, maybe it's the only issue is that Obi-Wan gets beaten again by Dooku, and it winds up being Anakin. But that could actually serve as a, like, look, the master is exceeding the student. Like, one thing that Obi-Wan was never able to do was completely take down Darth. If you have him battle him twice and twice fail, and that really 3 times, because imagine he's in Phantom Menace, fights him at best to a draw there, and then Attack of the Clones gets beaten. Then if you have it happen again, which it does at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, where Obi-Wan is again beaten by Darth Tyrannus, but then Anakin's suddenly able to do it. I mean, that is pretty much the effect of the way it's done anyway. They just have 2 battles instead of 3, but
it makes a bit of, if you think of the way that I justify it, is Obi-Wan and Anakin's slightly different story, because he's the chosen one, and he's the predecessor to Darth, to Christ. I forgot his name already. Dooku.
Obi-Wan is Dooku.
So, no. Anakin is the predecessor to Dooku. Effectively, is what ends up happening. He ends up taking out Dooku.
Successor, not
successor. Sorry, thank you. He's a successor to Dooku, and there you can make a justification that with the anger, Anakin's power grew. I mean, to be fair to Anakin, he made the right decision in sort of his future job, because he got much better training from Palpatine, clearly, because he expedited his understanding of the Force. As soon as he started killing young people, he was off and running. But the problem with Obi-Wan is he's not to that level. Obi-Wan is a Jedi Master, but he's not like whatever Yoda embodies, or even Dooku, or these are meant to be next level masters, and Obi-Wan is probably one of the best generals, but that's about it. So I think that's why they brought in Yoda, because Yoda was the only one that had the skill set to take on the level of mastery that Dooku had. So I think it wouldn't have served well, because if the story was consistent, he would just dispatch of Ewan McGregor's character. It would have been nice to see him make a better accounting of himself, or at least not just get knocked on the side with whatever it was he threw at him with the Force, and just lay on the ground half looking around over his shoulder. Didn't like that.
Well, Revenge of the Sith in general. I mean, well, we're going to talk about ranking, but I guess in a minute. But a couple broader points.
Well, go ahead. I was going to say, I think we've covered a lot of Revenge of the Sith. I think we really need to hammer how this film finished. But is there something else that you had in mind?
I did with Revenge of the Sith.
which is generally a very effective film, I find. But it came in out of my head. What I wanted to say about Revenge of the Sith. Nuts.
If it comes to you,
oh well.
Because so, I mean, for me, you know, the Revenge of the Sith had. This is when I watched Revenge of the Sith. This is where I thought these three films would have been an incredible streaming series, 3 series of streaming. How do I say episodes? Similar to The Mandalorian. I really liked The Mandalorian. I liked how it sort of
season 1 and 2 were really good.
Did we watch it? I've liked The Mandalorian. I liked
season 3. I didn't even finish yet. I want to go back and finish it, but it loses some zip off the fastball.
Yeah, but it's they have a bit more time to evolve. You know, if we look at Grogu and Mando, you know, that's slowly evolved, and you get to see that character evolve. And I think the only letdown is the time, because the way Palpatine expedites showing his hand as a Sith Lord, he kind of like he's got him on the rope at the opera. This is brilliant interplay where he's now, you know, the Jedi are they don't trust you. You know, I don't get it. You're really good at this shit. I don't understand. You know, you've been nothing but great. You know, I asked you to be my rep. They're not letting you do that. Sounds like there's something going on there. By the way, your mother's passed away. You know, we could have done something about that. You know about the Stark stuff, but like you're getting this big buildup, this inner conflict is starting to be settling in, and I like the fact that Anakin was going to Sammy Jackson's character and saying he's a Sith Lord, but in that before that, the way that he shows his hand is so quick and so not how it should have played out. I really wish they had more time to build up that influence over Anakin. You know, it's almost like if this was a hand of poker, he had an ace and a king and there were hearts, and he flopped a straight draw but didn't have the cards, and he's like, fuck it, I'm all in. You know, he just showed his hands very quickly, and that was down to the fact that there just wasn't the time to evolve what was such a great story arc. And that was where I'm like, oh, why couldn't we have more time with that?
I mean, you want more time with it because it's the most effective. I mean, it's the thing everybody paid to see, right? Is how does Anakin fall, right?
That's so good. It was so good up to that point.
I think I will say that again, back to Red Letter Media. I think that the observation that he makes is quite correct. That how is it not painfully obvious by the time he does show his hand? How is it not painfully obvious that he's the Sith Lord? Like when it finally dawns on the Jedi, you're like, what are you, stupid? You know, I mean, like everything that transpires does so in a way that benefits this man. He is in the best position to arrange things to be a certain way, keep himself in power, extend his term, and you know, when the idea that there is a Sith Lord, you know, like Yoda says, I think during Attack of the Clones, or maybe it's early in Revenge of the Sith, I sense the presence of the Sith or something like that. How do you not figure this out faster than you did? Like, I think it gets to the point where it has to come out because like it's already stretching plausibility that they haven't figured it out. The idea that like when Mace Windu hears it, I mean, his reaction should be, if it hasn't occurred to him yet, it should be like the light bulb should go on and he should go, oh yeah, you're right. And he kind of does, but he's still like, are you sure? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Like, you know,
well, so. Even just like I'm just thinking about the you know, when he insisted, he's like, Anakin, you know, you're this young kid and you are a fucking hothead. I would like you to represent me in the Jedi Council. Would you do that for me? And he's like, yeah, I'll do that. And the Jedi at no point were like, who the fuck is Palpatine? You know, why does he get this young important piece of our puzzle? You know, this is the chosen one. This is Neo, and Palpatine. He's kind of got some influence over this, like this like, you know, normie. You know, this guy who's just a politician is really taking charge of Anakin's mind, and this is supposed to be the next prophet. Yeah, at that point there should have been some bells ringing outside of Anakin's wild behavior. I think you can give a pass though to Anakin not because he's tugging at the heartstrings, from Anakin's perspective.
No,
he
it's not Anakin. It's not
No.
Anakin being fooled is fine. It's the rest
Yeah.
of them.
Are you and Anakin says it, and they're like, are you sure? Are you
Yeah.
sure that he's, the prophet? Now we're questioning the prophet. I think this guy's the Sith Lord. I'm telling you. And they're like, no, really? And he's like, yeah, really. He's like, all right, well, if you stay here, we trust you. We're going to go check it out.
Right. So I think that the timing of my point here, the timing of Palpatine's reveal, like if you tried to go any much further than you did, you'd just be like, well, these people are, I mean, it's already to the point, if you think about it, they're not too bright. You know what I mean? Like, so.
And Sammy Jackson, the way he went out in that, I remember watching that. It wasn't like a problem, but I wish they would have done something more than he fell out the window. Like he was holding, like he had Palpatine, was giving him the business. And I feel like he put himself in a position, because my wife would say, Nick was saying, clearly he knows that Anakin's not right in the head and Anakin's influenced by him. He's told Anakin to stay back. Anakin shows up and then he advances towards the Sith Lord, knowing that he's probably not going to be able to match up in the way that he thinks he is. And he's got Anakin flanking behind him, who's not listening to a damn thing he said. There's almost like a de-evolution in his decision making at that point as well. The character, I forget Samuel Jackson's character name.
Mace Windu.
Yeah, Windu. So the choreography of how that came about, again, it just is very rushed and very just. I wish they would have put more thought into that scene.
Well, no. They put lots of thought into it. Mace Windu went out the window.
He's out the window. Yeah. Did we break the window? Yeah. He's got. How do we get a Jedi Knight to fall out the window? Well,
we call him Mace Windu. We call him Mace Windu. There's only one thing that can happen to Mace Windu. He has to go out the window.
Yeah. Little did they know he was being named after his demise. He's like,
correct.
The Force was not working.
It's like poetry, Sean. It rhymes.
Well, it's the ultimate irony. It's like, you couldn't see with your name that you were going to fall out a window at the end of this thing. You couldn't just stay by the door and say, listen, I'm going to guard the door. I'll get some help. If none of that.
If you're talking timing issues, though, I think that my issue with the timing in the film and the pacing, there's not a lot of time, first of all, left for dark side Anakin, like Darth Vader. Like I would have expected to see a little bit more of, first of all, Darth Vader in his full power with that, before injury in the suit. One of the things that disappointed me at the time of seeing Revenge of the Sith, and I won't say anything more about Obi-Wan, the series that you're going to watch, but it's definitely worth a look, was that at no point does anybody, well, Obi-Wan really, see Darth Vader afterwards, like after the thing. So he there's just an indicator like that he knows what happened and what he looks like now. Like you don't get that scene, which I think would have been an effective scene, like seeing like, oh God, like that's what's become of my apprentice. That that my apprentice, the person that we thought was the chosen one, that he's now this machine thing. Like that would have been an effective little scene that just, and a payoff that just doesn't come. Because they don't have enough time. And the other thing, in terms of the pacing, he goes from, like, okay, I just tossed Mace Windu out the window, or I disrupted the battle between the Emperor, the Emperor and, he's not quite the Emperor yet, Palpatine and Mace Windu, such that Palpatine's able to throw Windu out the window.
Yeah. And
now I kneel and I say, I'll do whatever you ask. And the first thing you've got to do is go to the Jedi Temple and slaughter children, which is both, for a film sequence that starts with Phantom Menace and casting Anakin Skywalker and having a bunch of childish little jokes like we talked about at the beginning of this recording, and a movie that is very clearly and with intention to some degree designed with the idea that the 7, 8, 9-year-old set are going to be watching it and they need things to enjoy. To go from that to your first order of business is to go kill a bunch of defenseless children, and then he does it on screen. Well, not quite on screen, but I mean, like, that's both, like, it seems over the top it seems really fast. Like he went from like,
Yeah.
you know, Palpatine's a Sith Lord. We got to stop him. Like he's on the good side. He's telling Windu, we got to stop him to, I'll do whatever you want. Slaughter children. You got it. I go there and I slaughter children.
What else is he going to do though? What else? I mean, he's already killed Windu.
Well, and you could argue that that's like Palpatine's test of whether or not he's really fallen. Like, I'm going for the biggest ask first. Oh, no, I'm not going to go ask you to just kill some other Jedi. You go to that temple where there's a bunch of defenseless children and you slaughter them, mow them down, and prove to me you're really on the right. You could look at it that way. I would say generally, and this is something that, you know, I will say, it wasn't about this movie, but you know, when you see these things when you're in your 20s, you're like, okay, that's cool, whatever.
Yeah.
You start to have father thoughts.
Yeah.
I didn't show these movies to my kid for quite a while because in Revenge of the Sith, you got Dooku being beheaded on screen, which was enough right on it. It's like, it's a bit much for, you know, for kids.
It's a bit much for Star Wars, to be fair.
Yeah. And then even more was the sequence where, the Anakin Skywalker walks into a temple and it's clear that he's going to kill a bunch of children. Yeah. And it feels a little like, you know, the whole arc of what Lucas is quite right about is that what the prequel movies really effectively did. If you watch the original 3 as they existed on their own for the first 16, 17, after Return of the Jedi came out for 16 years, that's all there was. And if you were to say, like, what's the major plot of these films? Well, it's the story of Luke Skywalker, his rise, what he has to do to become a Jedi, and his relationship with his father. You insert the prequel films, and now all of a sudden, the main thrust of these films is the rise, fall, and redemption of Anakin Skywalker. It becomes Anakin Skywalker's story, not Luke's.
Yeah.
Luke is an important part of it, but it's Anakin Skywalker's story. But if we're going to talk about like rehabilitating somebody, who's, you know, maybe given into the dark side and helped an emperor consolidate power and taken democratic votes away from people and all that. That's something someone could say, oh, you know what? I realized the error of my ways. I shouldn't have done that. And that's redeemable. You just turned him into like, I mean, you walked into a Jedi temple and slaughtered children. I mean, redemption's redemption, but it's like, you know, if you start thinking about those children as well, all those people have mothers and fathers. Do they want to hear about Luke? So they're like, well, I found the good in him.
Yeah.
Fuck you. like that's like talking about like, you know, finding the good in the you know, Sandy Hook Elementary kid shooting. Like, fair, no, there's no
Vader in Jedi. He had a very Catholic ending. You know, he did a lot of bad shit, and he kind of repented on his deathbed.
He did. It's a very Catholic story.
He goes to heaven. He ascends, and he's now one of. It's like that guy at the end of the 3. If you're watching Jedi and you knew the backstory was, well, he murdered children to get into that position.
Right.
You know, it would change the spectrum. I mean, it's interesting because I don't have kids, and I didn't look at it that way, and I've not really questioned that until now, and it does seem extreme.
I'll tell you, the first time I ever had the dad thought about Star Wars was actually not with any of these movies. Is I was watching Rogue One, and like that movie. Have you seen it?
Oh, it's brilliant. I love it.
It's a very good movie in some ways. I have issues with it, but one of them is that like the purported good guys, one of the battle sequences, they're in a town, they're fighting stormtroopers. And one of them does this thing that's now become cool and popular since the Dark Knight, and the Joker does it in the Dark Knight, but the Joker does it in the Dark Knight. In Rogue One, it's a hero who's walking through town. They've finished the battle. Most of it's done. There's a stormtrooper who kind of moves on the ground, like he's still alive and maybe a threat. And the guy just takes his gun over here and without even looking, shoots him. Yeah. I was like, what on, that's the good guy. What in the name of God are you? And then, you know, that movie famously had to have whole sequences of it reshot before they were willing to put it out there because it was so brutal. And that got left in. I'm wondering what was
like, well, you know, this is what makes my favorite trilogy, the Family Guy trilogy. The Family Guy trilogy does a brilliant job. Which have you said you've seen it? You're not that fussed about it.
I've seen it and I didn't think it was very good.
I loved it because it actually
except for the bit with Stewie and
the
exhaust port. It gets a mess. That's hilarious. The rest of it I found to be kind of
I love this whole like throwback, and Austin Powers did this quite well, looking at these evil organizations that they're made up of people that come from somewhere and have families. And there's like that one of the scenes I love in it is the two guys that are standing on the edge of the gun in the Death Star. And in Family Guy, like it personalizes this, and like they shoot the blow up Tatooine, and the guy just said, Bill, I just want a rail. And he's like, yeah, they just said we're going to be leaning on it all day. Like, because they were on this, I don't know if you remember, they're on this elevated platform and there's no protection behind them. And they're just on this little computer. They duck down when the big ray gun shoots and blows up the planet. And Family Guy then looks at that and says, well, yeah, why would you not have a rail there? And these two guys are having a chat like they would. Yeah, why can't we have a rail? And it's interesting that you don't, when you watch these films, you don't think about what is the backstory behind that stormtrooper, which is one of the things I did like. And just to sort of segue for when we do cover the next iteration, I've always liked that backstory of Christ, I forgot his name, the black guy.
Finn.
I love that backstory because you start to see a little bit more in that stormtrooper, that sort of society in that world. And Mandalorian did that well. These are normal people that are working for organization, military, probably getting some sort of benefit. And, those glamour shots depend on you not necessarily looking at these stormtroopers as people.
Yeah. No, I think Finn is probably the best character of the sequel film, so I don't disagree with you there, but we'll save that for another day.
We'll save that for, well, I think we need to bring it home because I'm going to have dinner requirements here coming up soon. And I think we need to finish by talking about the thing I think we both agree about, and we touched on it, is the horrible, horrible ending of Padmé, which really does a disservice to what is one of the better films in the series.
Yeah.
And we did touch on it, and it's her completely giving up because her man has killed younglings and has moved to the dark side. She's done. She's down. So this courageous, leader, this queen at a young age, has died effectively of a broken heart. And then the scene where she names Luke and Leia passing away, like Luke, Leia, and then boom, she's gone. It's just like, again, it's a time thing. It's like, man, we need to kill off Padme and we need to name Luke and Leia, and she needs to have these kids. We got 2 minutes. Let's get it in. Let's go. And it's a really disappointing part of it. I mean, I don't have a problem with her dying. And there's theories out there that
she had to die.
Of course she had to die, but there's things you could have had her physically harmed by Anakin, like actually hurt fatally. And instead they're like, no, she's okay. We just, we got all this technology. We can't do anything for her. She's choosing to die.
Well, I actually don't have the problem with the idea that Anakin's not actually responsible for her death. Like, that's kind of like a Shakespearean motif where the Emperor convinces Darth Vader that he's the one who did it, but is not actually the case. But I think that what they needed was somehow for it to be made clear that Palpatine, like, basically, force put the pillow over her head just when it looked like she was going to recover or whatever.
That's what, if you read about it, if you Google or start searching the internet for, what people think about it, there are people that, and I don't know if this is legitimate point of view based on research, or if this is just hoping that that's not the way it is, who believe that Palpatine, was actually responsible for her death in some way with his crazy voodoo powers. But
right. I mean, it would make more sense. Yeah. I think, unfortunately, the film doesn't really support that, but it would make more sense. But I mean, we're in a total agreement. And then, of course, you get the famous no, which if you've ever seen the Japanese, apparently on the Japanese DVDs, that no is translated as do not want in Japanese. So if you've ever seen Darth Vader like this, and then underneath it says do not want, it's because on the Japanese DVD, like that's how that got translated into Japanese, which is hilarious. Yes.
And by the way, Obi-Wan, how poor a decision was it you didn't just dispatch of Anakin when he was like, one, you just sort of let him like roast and just burn slowly to death. That was some gangster shit. But he didn't. He could have just like, knocked his head off, called it a day. Instead, let Darth Vader come back as a robot, crushing people and choking colleagues left, right, and center, which I think was never a good management strategy.
Yeah, I don't have a big problem with the fact that he just walks off. Like, I could see like kind of like having that thing like you were the chosen one. You were supposed to bring balance to the Force, not leave it in ruins. Like somebody who's feeling that way, not wanting to like just slice his head off and be done with it. You know what I mean? Or put the lightsaber. Like, I'm just going to walk, like seeing like he looks like he's going to die. There's nothing around. There would be no reason to suspect he would survive that. Just not being able to bring himself to just deal the death blow. When the guy's already basically down for the count. So that doesn't bother me too much. Never did.
I think in the end, I walked away from this experience. Whenever we do these reviews, I really enjoy looking at them again with new eyes. I have a higher opinion of the prequels than I did before. I don't hate them. If I was to hate anything, it would be Padmé's de-evolution, or however you want to word that, and anything Gungan, just not happy with. Outside of that, I think they're acceptable films. As far as ranking them, what would be your number 3 film out of it? Your third, your least favorite?
That's so tough.
It
really is, because I'm going to put it on the table. Revenge of the Sith is the best of the 3. It has all the things that people paid to see. That's why the prequels exist, is to see what happens in Revenge of the Sith. Yeah. So you're down to the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And I've gone back and forth over the years. Both films have strengths and weaknesses. It's very difficult for me to say which one. It can depend on my mood, the day, and everything else. I will, for the last several years, I've maintained that Attack of the Clones is the weakest of the 3, so I guess I'll stay with that. But I'm really not married to that position at all. For a long time, I thought the Phantom Menace was. It could go either way.
I'm the same way, but I think I'd reverse that. I think I would actually go 3 is favorite, 2 is second, and 1 is third. And I struggle with that because with Attack of the Clones, I struggle with Amidala's character. I struggle with the interplay between Anakin and Padmé. I struggle between Anakin and Padmé's interplay, their budding relationship. But I think Phantom Menace, some of those scenes with Jar Jar in battle and the introduction of the Gungans is enough for me to say that's my third or my least favorite of the series. So really enjoyed that one today, Dixon. We're gonna have to figure out where we go from here. I need to drink less water when I do these, because by the time I get to this point, I'm desperate for a pee.
Well, yes, we have the sequel trilogy to discuss. We could discuss Obi-Wan if you wanted. Let's
watch Obi-Wan. Maybe we need to go in actual order.
I wouldn't mind giving that a rewatch. So you want to do the Obi-Wan?
Why don't we do? Because Obi-Wan, I think, is next. We looked at the actual timeline. I think that's next. So why don't we maybe look at going down the timeline and then revisiting the originals, and then.
Well, you do Rogue One in there, I guess.
Yeah. Well, to everybody,
I have a big problem with Rogue One, but we'll talk about that.
Well, don't spoil that one. But to everyone who's watching, and you can tell that I'm desperate for a piss, and I don't mind saying that, because if you made it this far and you put a comment in, "Hey, I heard you talking about having to piss," then that we know.
I have a big problem with that. That's that toilet humor I was talking
no. That's purposeful. That's purposeful. So, to anybody who's watching, thanks for sticking around this long. We are going to be coming back, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Well, maybe we'll see. To possibly review Obi-Wan Kenobi. But if you have stayed this long, subscribe, enjoy, and let us know what you think. What are your favorites of the prequels? Dixon, thanks so much, and we'll catch everyone soon.
Thanks.